Hello everyone, it's Mxiety. I am on tonight with Dr. R. Kelly. Say hello to everyone so we can make sure our sound is working.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, I think it's working.
I sound perfect, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe a little loud on the gain. Like, I don't...
I can try to turn it down.
A smidgeroon.
Sure.
It's Ryan!
Also a fairly loud individual.
Listen, I get that problem, but then they tell me that I come in too quiet, so I don't know how that works.
That's fair. Who knows?
Okay.
Is that better?
That is better, except that your name isn't your name.
Oh, no, it is not.
Yeah, we fixed it. Wait, that's not... I still didn't fix it. Oy, oy, oy. I'm a professional,
So
gosh darn nabbit.
We're so close. Just like the R&B singer.
There we go. All right, better. Just can't call him Batman. It's fine. Perfect. All right, Batman, how's it going?
Pretty good. It's going pretty good for me.
Yeah. I'm good.
That's a pretty good dance. I like it. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a psychologist, and I'm also the co-founder of Geeks Like Us. It's a community-based media company that tries to foster unapologetic enthusiasm and works with other professionals who are in the industry or doing geek-related things to help our community turn their passion into a career. I believe we'll probably post a link of how to join that community at one point, but
Boop.
yeah, I mean, a lot of my work is related to, whether it be book writing or research or clinical practice, is related to virtual reality. So I have a big virtual reality room that I do a number of things, including creating what we call functional neuroanatomical profiles of the brain. Basically, my clients can walk in this 20 by 16 foot room with a wireless VR and go inside a brain that represents their mental health condition. So with relevant focal areas of depression or anxiety or whatever, and they can even engineer it. So I do a lot of VR, which is pretty awesome. I'm a gaming psychologist, so we work a lot with learning how to use video games to help people. I'm a D&D therapist, so I run social skills groups around D&D. And yeah, and actually before I got into the gaming circuit, I did comic conventions almost entirely. So I still do comic cons and gaming cons, which we're doing this week. You might be getting one of my kiddos. That I'm doing this week, but before that it was almost entirely comic conventions. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the rundown. And I with relevant to what we're talking about today, because I know we're talking neurodiversity, I used to work in a neuropsych lab. And so I used to be very big into imaging and more of the hard science aspect, but I got to a point where I really wanted to work directly with people. And so now I work in a private practice.
Neat. All right. Yep. That is cool. You've been in a lot of places, you've seen a lot of things, and now you're going to tell us about them. I love it. Yeah.
Seen some stuff. hard stuff.
Oh, Dr. Kelly's one of the most talented and intelligent people I know. It's not often that in the audience somebody tells me about our guests.
Steffi.
Oh, no.
Buddy.
I'm sure he loves that.
Oh my God, you're making... I call Steffi all the time. I hope he likes it, because I'm going to keep calling it. Steffi McGrossum. That's what his name is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All right, so I am opening, unlike other interviews, I'm opening the queue right now, immediately. And what does that mean? That means you can ask us questions as we go, because the whole point of debunking these myths is talking to you and learning what myths you want debunked and stuff like that. So yeah. Wait,
no,
what?
I'm so excited about their involvement.
Okay, all right, great.
And then I used a word that could be misconstrued.
Okay, right. You're like, and then I said nothing. I was quiet.
And then I was quiet and respectful. Sitting on my hands. I'm sitting on my hands now.
Dr. Kelly's a great singer too. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Somebody had to make the joke. All right. Anyway. All right. So let's talk neurodiversity. Let's talk all the things.
Oh my.
Grit and yeah. So one of the most let's start with the basic one.
Sure.
People have mental illness. I can't say these. Okay, I'm like expected to say these with a straight face. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not gonna be able to do that.
No. Tell me more. What are you about to say?
Swear to me. No, I'm sorry. I'll stop the Batman. You got me started on the Batman, and I want to do Batman all over the place.
I'm just
no,
leaving
go
you.
ahead. I'm a professional. I'm a doctor. Keep going.
I'm a professional. All right. Well, at least you said it, so now we all know.
Right.
Okay. All right. So the first one is people have mental illness for attention.
I wish I had a pipe.
Yes, quite. Yes,
Bully.
quite. Attention.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, tell me how you would like me to start. Do you want me to just take off where I think I should?
Yeah, you're the expert here.
So there are two very different statements.
Okay.
There was a statement made on your channel once by a viewer who subscribed to the myth that depression is just people wanting attention, with just being a really critical word in that sentence. That's absolutely not true, and we're going to talk about that. But are there people who will exaggerate symptoms or be dishonest about symptoms to get attention? Of course, we're human beings. When it comes down to it, we're still hedonic creatures. We pursue what's pleasurable and we avoid what's aversive. And because of that, emotions can be a very powerful tool within relationships and within this world. And so some people will use them to their gain, whether it be to get out of doing something hard or being able to do something fun. We have two words in clinical psychology for this. One is malingering. Malingering largely refers to people doing it for some sort of tangible gain. It's for people who malinger, people with antisocial personality disorder will be likely to malinger. It's the idea of, I don't want to go to jury duty, so I'm going to pretend I broke my ankle, or I'm having a depressive episode or something.
Sure.
And there's a tangible gain. It's largely manipulative.
Sure.
Then you have another group called factitious disorders. Factitious disorders, the one that people know a lot of or have heard often, is Munchausen's by proxy. That's a factitious disorder onto somebody else. You're projecting symptoms that don't exist onto somebody else. But yes, there are people who have factitious disorders where they will exaggerate or make up symptoms for some psychological gain. And it could be broad stroked called attention, but it could also be they want social support. Here's something I would say before we start to make too many judgments about people with factitious disorders. When we look at some things that lead to people to do this, to exaggerate symptomology or make it up, they have a history of social isolation. Their self-esteem tends to be very low. Again, not clinically depressed, but low self-esteem. They don't love themselves. They don't often feel loved by others because of social isolation or whatever else it may be. Some do have trauma in their background. So these aren't bad people that are just being like, yes, I'm gonna make them do things. I'm sad. Like that's not how it works. It's they don't know a better way to get support or to make meaningful relationships or to express or to even be aware of what their feelings are or to express those feelings that they're not even aware of clearly. So yes, there are some people, and I will say, when we look at people with factitious disorders, they did a study, about 455 sample size. About 42% were also diagnosed with depression, meaning at one point they went to a psychologist or someone capable of diagnosing, and they went through a series of checklists and said, yep, you meet the criterion based upon what I'm hearing. I'm not challenging what you're saying. Yes, you're clinically depressed. And then 16% met criterion for a personality disorder. So it's, when I was thinking about what you had said about that viewer, I thought to myself, okay, and to give some empathy to people whom we might immediately throw in the a-hole category.
Sure.
And I like that you said you must be really hurting. I like that you thought about a guy that I think a lot of people would have been very quick to immediately say you're a terrible person for saying that.
Because they are.
No, I mean, no,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's good that you didn't rush to that, because imagine that you care for someone deeply, and this person has a factitious disorder. And because you care for them deeply, you have a lot of empathy for them. Empathy, of course, being more than sympathy. It's I'm feeling what you feel. So I'm investing a lot of my time in this person who has a factitious disorder. They're saying they're very depressed. They want to kill themselves, all these things. I'm like, oh gosh, that's horrible. And I feel bad with you, not just for you. I feel bad with you. And all of my time is now preoccupied on, I got to make her feel better. I'm sitting at the dinner table. How's your day, honey? I'm just really worried about Jessica or Sam or whatever. And you're spending all of this energy and all this emotions, and your well-being starts to decrease. And then you find out, and they say they have depression. Then you find out that you've been being used, right? And that it's actually, that's not the case, and things aren't lining up, right? Things just aren't lining up quite right. And then it's, you've been used, you've wasted a lot of your time, you've been lied to, you feel violated, you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, and then you were taken advantage of.
Right.
And so a very natural human instinct is, if there is a 10% chance it could harm me, I'm going to assume the other 90% is harmful. So this person hurt me, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm making sweeping assumptions. People with depression are just doing it for attention, right? It's not right. It's wrong. Let's be clear. It's incorrect. But in their experience, which I like why you sort of said you must be hurting so much to this person. Maybe they did have a bad experience. Maybe they had a parent. They had a borderline personality disorder, a parent with borderline personality disorder, or just a straight up factitious disorder. And they're like, oh my God, I have worn down to the nub. And my paradigm of what mental health is people who do not care about you, who just care about themselves, and they try to hurt you. And then you're left with this echo of this myth that, it's just for attention, right?
Gotcha.
But, yeah.
Gotcha. Zero Orion asks, is the psychological aspect trended more to the subconscious response or more conscious?
It's more conscious. I think a lot of people with factitious disorder will try to put it on subconscious. But people who do this tend to have what's called an external locus of control. This means that they believe they are not in control of their own life. They're not in control over their own feelings. They have very little power, and they believe it's everyone else's fault. It's the kid who gets an F on a test and blames the teacher, right, for not liking them. It's like, well, okay, versus internal. You sort of feel like you have power. Now, for people who are like this, who go down this path, usually there's some environmental circumstance that led to it, or a personality disorder, and they start to do it and they get gains from it.
Right.
And maybe when they're kids, it's subconscious. Young children, for instance, when we ask kids if they're depressed when they're 7, we don't ask, do you feel deep melancholy, Caleb? We're not doing that. I mean, it's basically, hey, buddy, do you have a lot of tummy aches? Do you have a lot of headaches? Do you have a lot of, mom and dad, does he complain about his foot hurting? Does he do whatever? And because that's what children do. They don't know how to understand the emotion.
Right.
So they have what's called a psychosomatic response. They say, I know something's wrong. I don't know what it is. So I'm sick, right? But actually they're anxious or they're depressed or something.
I still do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I joke, but also I still do that where I'm like, oh, my stomach hurts. And then I'm like, I think I might be anxious. But it's a gradual understanding of it's a different tummy ache. It's,
Well, not to mention that for anxiety, for instance, not to mention the middle ground where anxiety does actually cause increased, acidity in the stomach, which makes more gas, and now you actually do have a stomach ache, right? Sure. Or your blood vessels, constrict and increases pressure, blood pressure goes up, and anxiety, you have a headache. Those are real, right? But psychosomatic is very true. I mean, people will feel like something's wrong, and they're not lying. So it starts off like that. And then what happens is they get in the habit of doing that. And it's maybe subconscious at first because they don't know how to express it. But then as time goes on, they keep building off of that foundation that was made. And then they do know what they're doing. There's, I want to kill myself. And for these people, no, they actually don't, right? But again, that doesn't mean that there's not another problem under there.
There's
Again,
still I think
right.
there's still a repercussion to say, like, there's still an understanding of there is going to be a reaction to me saying this, and so I'm seeking this certain reaction, and
Yes.
in seeking that reaction, I need something, because I'm looking for something. I'm not getting what I need. I'm not asking for what I need,
Yes.
but I'm looking for something.
Some psychological need is not being met. I mean, try to empathize for a second. Think about if you are in a place where you have such limited understanding of your feelings or how to express yourself, or you've had this bad habit and you have a history of feeling social isolation or not feeling like you're loved or you belong anywhere. And the only way that you know how to feel any sense of connection is to say, I'm going to kill myself tonight, or whatever it is. And everyone sweeps in, oh, don't do that. We care about you. And that's the only way that you know how to feel that. I mean, that's an awful place to be, where you're like, this is my one time where I feel loved and like I belong. And then everywhere else I feel empty, like there's a void I can't fill. It's not. So again, it's this idea of like, well, they're just a cry for help, or they just want attention, or whatever. You have to remove the just. That's not the case.
I like that. Just remove the just.
Just remove the just. And trademark Mxiety and Kelly.
Yeah. Emma Kelly.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
It's Melly. What? That's so easy. Melly. That would be the actor. Melly.
Perfect.
With an X, because it's cool. X's are cool. Yeah.
Or we can make it complicated and be Mxiety.
Sure. You know what? Yes. Done.
Well, it's funny. I had a cosplay friend of mine make me a half Totoro, half Snorlax Kigu outfit. And we didn't know to go with Totolax or Snorlolo. Totolax sounds cool, but it sounds like a laxative. And Snorlolo, I mean, Snorlolo's good. But Totolax sounds like a thing I want to take when I've had too much cheese. Snorlolo, man.
Man, I'm feeling, I just, like, after that Thanksgiving dinner, I'm just feeling a lot of Snorlolo.
A lot of Snorlolo happening. Yeah.
That must have been majestic. Yes, I totally agree, Zuki. I totally agree. Snorlolo is the best. Oh my gosh. If you just a reminder, if y'all want to ask a question, exclamation letter Q, that helps me track it a lot easier, so I'm not like, oh, I think I saw one in chat. Exclamation lowercase letter Q, and then your question, and then it can be in the in the queue. That's what I'm looking for.
I do see one question that I think is a really good question.
Go for it. Go for it.
So Gearwolf74 says, can this be relational to other disorders, or is it predominantly a part of BD? Now, it's interesting when you say BD, because we have BD and BPD. One is bipolar and one is borderline personality disorder, and they are often confused. Just to clarify real fast, bipolar is episodic. If you're not in an episode, you're going to come off just normal, just neurotypical, right? And just quote normal. You're going to be stable. You're not going to be reactive. You're going to be fine. But then you have moments once a year, once every 3 years, where for 2 weeks or more, you are experiencing a very high, like mania or hypomania, or very low, like dysthymia or depression. Borderline personality disorder, which people tend to say, oh, that person's bipolar. Borderline personality disorder has to do with identity crisis and very difficult time regulating mood. That is where, beyond just the brain making you feel bad, maybe someone doesn't smile at you as big as they normally do, and then you think they hate me, I feel rejected, and then you're depressed, and you're incredibly, incredibly depressed. And then someone says, wow, you look really good in that sweater, and you feel really, really good again. And it's just kind of like, there's like tough time having a floor and a ceiling. So what I will say is borderline personality disorder is the one that Factitious more relates to. Histrionic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and malingering tends to go with antisocial personality disorder. But the most common one is depression. When we look at people with factitious disorders, the most common comorbid condition is depression. I hope that answered your question, but it was a good question.
It was a really good question. Bipolar disorder, sorry for the confusion. So there you go. But we touched on both because of that. Yeah. similar to RSD. Is RSD rejection sensitivity disorder? Because I always get worried about that one because it's not a DSM diagnosis.
It's if you are referring to that rejection sensitivity, like M said, it is not a clinical diagnosis. However, the main function of borderline is struggling to trust people and fearing rejection above all else. So, in fact, the biggest difference between borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder is borderline is sort of a fear of rejection and issues with identity, where antisocial personality disorder is more so that they get a sense of identity from their immediate state, right? So there really is no, hat rack to hang a hat on. This is kind of, yeah.
Gotcha. All right. We have another question in the queue. Wolf Wraith asks, myth or fact, bipolar and borderline personality can be working in conjunction against someone?
Like they have both at the same time?
Yeah, that's what comorbidity is the way I'm taking that.
So in the DSM-4, you could not have both. And the DSM-5, we recognize something. For people with bipolar, if they are going to have a personality disorder, it is usually borderline personality. And we do believe they can exist at the same time.
Oh, okay.
But it is really hard to separate out. And I will say that very rarely is someone with borderline going to be diagnosed by a clinician as, well, how do I say this?
Screaming children in the background. Really,
I think
they add, I think, because we're talking about borderline personality and stuff, so they add an atmosphere to it. It works.
Well, I'll say it can exist in unison. I want to be careful here because there's something that happens. There are some people with borderline that are given a diagnosis of bipolar, and they relate to it very much. And then when they see someone else who's maybe has a more specialist eye or well-trained eye, they're like, this is not, because even clinicians will forget that the bipolar is episodic. They just won't look up the old stuff. They'll develop this idea, especially if they never really knew much about it, and they'll assume that's the case. But once people get a diagnosis, you have to be incredibly careful about challenging it. Whether you're right or wrong, once someone identifies with a diagnosis,
is that why some doctors don't give diagnoses?
I'm very careful with diagnoses.
I had a not like a, but it was a thing with my doctor where I was like, I would like to know what I'm diagnosed with because I'm a mental health advocate and it's important to me because people ask me and I want to be able to represent whatever it is I am appropriately. And not say the wrong thing. And she's like, I don't think you need your diagnosis. It's just not going to serve you. And I was like, well, it's really not for me, but I understand your concern. And she, no,
I would say it absolutely is for you, right? Like above and beyond, it shouldn't be for anybody but you. I love that you share that with everybody, and that's great, and that's amazing. But when it comes down to it, that is what the clinician's thinking is they're like, all right, so this person meets criterion for a few things. And gosh, I didn't do a full battery, meaning I didn't do an IQ, an achievement, multiple social emotional personality scales. I didn't spend 8 hours assessing this person, which is technically what's required for a very firm diagnosis. So I think they're anxious. They're also depressed. I don't know which one's the primary. I don't know if the anxiety is causing the depression or the depression is causing the anxiety, but I know where to target intervention. And then the client says, what am I? Right? Here is the fear that can exist with a diagnosis. Sometimes with a diagnosis, it does create a self-fulfilling prophecy depending on the personality of the client or the person. They might even sort of say, well, take ADHD. That's really common with children, where they'll do something wrong. And they're like, oh, I have ADHD. That's why I did it. And you're like, buddy.
Yeah.
It's hard for you because you have ADHD, but that actually means we have to work harder on it. And that you're going to work with Dr. K, and we're going to work on a few tools, right? And you have other things like creativity and emotional intelligence you don't need to work on because yours are way high. You have ADHD.
Yeah.
But your executive functioning and your impulse control and your motivation, we got to do a few things, right? So self-fulfilling can be a thing. As well, if there's any concern that the person may steer towards over-identifying with a disability. That can be a problem. There is a big difference between saying I am a person with depression versus saying I am a depressed person. If you view yourself as a depressed person, where this is this inherent thing in me and I'm defined by my sadness, then it can be bad. Versus, yeah, I recognize sometimes I'm defined by thousands of things. There are times where I will go low and I need to do my interventions to prevent it from happening. And there are times where I have to take mental health days, but I don't view myself as this hunchback, type of, I'm broken. So a lot of people, when they're doing fine, but then they go into an episode, the thing that sticks with them, that echo, that haunting voice is, I'm broken. I'm weird. I'm different. And in moments of depression, if you have a ton of stuff to latch onto for that, it can be really hard. Now, on the other side, diagnoses can be wonderful. Depending on the person, it can make you better understand yourself. It can make you feel the opposite. You're like, oh, I'm not weird. I'm a person who has depression. Oh, see, I thought I was lazy and annoying. And I thought I was just a wuss. No. Oh God, that makes so much more sense. My brain is, it's
but that's so hard because I've run into this with people where and the counter argument that people have made by saying that they've argued me and then they've said, no, I'm depressed. I'm a depressed person. I don't just have depression. I'm depressed.
Right.
So and they'll say that the argument to that is this runs my life. And I've heard people say that about ADHD as well. If you don't have good grasp on executive functioning and the things that are inhibited by having ADHD, it can feel like it takes over your whole life. I know on days when I'm depressed, it doesn't feel like I'm anything except a depressed blob. And I definitely identify with that more. But then on days when I feel better, of course I say, I have depression, I have this, I have that.
Sure.
So it's interesting to me because I've heard that counter argument. Do you have a counter to the counter argument?
Yes, if you say, okay, so let's I'll go a little even more extreme. The idea of I'm a depressed person versus I'm a person with depression, right? Meaning I have the tendency to have a neurochemical imbalance, which will make me feel depressed for no reason. The latter is empowering. It says this is a part of me, but it isn't me. It's something that happens and it can be very intrusive and it can take over my life. But ultimately, I can develop a paradigm that I am in control, that I am the one who has some control over my brain at times. And I also know when it can be too much. And I can define myself by all these other ways. Versus if you say, I am depression incarnate, you have just removed any power of yours. Because guess what? Every time you're not depressed, you're not you. Anytime you're not depressed, you're no longer you anymore. Because you're a depressed person. I'm depression. So if I'm happy,
I'm anxiety. You. Sorry.
All right.
Sorry. So you teed me up.
And the follow-up is this. It's the idea of when people, it's hard enough when you are a person with depression to be comfortable being happy because you worry the higher up I fly, I'm going to fall eventually and I'm just going to fall harder. So you're constantly I just want to go back to my depression hole because at least I know what that is and I'm familiar with it and I know how to navigate it. And at least I don't have to get my hopes up. Right. So it's hard enough with that, and there goes my thoughts. Hold on, my dog and my. You're fine.
You're fine. Get your thoughts together. We have time, and let me respond to some people in chat.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Getting these insights from others in the other industries is so incredible. Oh, Zero, I'm so glad you like that. You're not lazy if you're exhausted all the time. Right. I'm not depressed. I'm losing hope. My diagnosis of autism actually helped. The removal of the I'm broken voice inside being autistic has allowed me to target my effort towards things that help instead of flailing around and searching for a way to fix the I'm broken. Defining thing versus facet is what it is. Exactly. All right. You have your train of thought back? Choo-choo.
More or less. It's somewhere around there. So Indigo, I love giving the diagnosis of Asperger's or ADHD to certain people. And parents will come in and say, I'm really worried. We think my kid's Aspie, but I'm worried that, they're going to feel different or whatever. But Asperger's is one of those conditions where it's really not, we really don't view it as a disability. It's a different set of strengths and weaknesses. They just function different. It's the same way as if you have a bunch of sea life, marine life, before there was, terra life, and one went on land. Every creature in the water was like, get back in the water, idiot. You're struggling out there. And the fish is out there like, but it's surviving. That's evolution. Evolution is messy. It's difficult, and a lot of us view Asperger's as a next stage of evolution in a world that is increasingly technological. So for Asperger's, it's like, look, man, you have your strengths and you have your weaknesses, and let's go with it. There's a lot of mental health conditions where we love to go that way, to go that route of like, look, like let's say even depression. The idea of creativity is higher. Artistic ability tends to be higher. To some extent, empathy, when they're not depressed, be higher, so it comes with strengths. And then yes, regulation, is a weakness. But so I will say this, all in all, it depends on the person. I will tell you, if I have someone who's really, really hyper-focused on a diagnosis, I do worry a little, because you have people who almost put them on themselves like badges, right? They're like, I'm looking, like take borderline personality. They're looking for an identity.
Yeah.
They're looking for anything to identify with. So, they'll sometimes take it and be like, so I'm depressed. I have an eating disorder, all these things. And they're like, I'm identifying, for these individuals specific I'm talking about, I'm identifying as a hopeless victim. And that makes therapy very difficult. And the likelihood that they can change very difficult, because they're identifying with being broken, and we don't want that. So it's just, it's client by client.
This is so cool. This always fascinates me, and like this alone I can talk about for so long, just because just exactly what you're talking about, because this comes up a lot, and I am always for some reason taken aback when people come in, they're like, oh yeah, you're a mental health advocate, do you even have any illnesses? And I'm like, is it like Pokemon cards? Are we gonna trade now, where I tell you mine?
I love this abrasive New York guy. Hey, oh, all right, now you got.
hey, I got depression. I'm walking here. Yeah.
I'm walking here.
Sorry, I'm from Jersey.
Are you? Oh, that's cool.
It's close. It's close kin. Anyway, but yeah, so I have, and then I say, I have depression, anxiety, and ADHD. And I will then, describe, and I'll also use that as ways, I always say explanation versus excuse, right? So I also will use that as a way to explain stuff where like there will be a clear mismatch of my executive function happening while I stream. And the chat is like, ADHD, huh? And I'm like, you know what? I'm a poster boy. What am I going to tell you? That's it. That's what it is. And we just like move on. But again, it's the explanation aspect of it.
Right.
But at the same time, I do know that there was a point in my life where I was wrapped up in my diagnosis as a way, because like Zero was saying, I needed some way to explain that I wasn't broken. And then the way that I wasn't broken was the thing that defined me.
Right.
And for so long, as I was seeking my identity and as I like dealt with childhood trauma and everything, it was incredibly difficult to figure out what was going on. What did I have going on outside of my trauma? Because for so long, for years of my life, my trauma was that was everywhere. It was I saw when I went to Starbucks, like I saw when I was driving my car, like that was my life. So I understand that, but I feel like this phenomena is also very strong on Twitter, which also makes me nervous, because kids are on Twitter and they see that, and there's this phenomenon on Twitter where mental health advocates will crop up, and their whole bio is just like, oh, I have this and this and this.
It's such a minefield out there. Oh my God, the person would have been so terrible. It's such a minefield out there, because it's hard either way to communicate right now. People are very sensitive, and in many ways it's very good, and in many ways it's not good, and it's not helpful to the dialogue. But there's, again, it's all about balance, and that balance is so idiosyncratic. One balance for this person is going to be the worst balance for this person, right? And like even ADHD, here's a big pet peeve of mine. let's say, okay, so you have ADHD.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Let's say you misplaced something for a minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then someone's like, ADHD. You're also a human being who has the right to err.
Yeah.
And it's the idea is that now anytime, anything that has to do with inattention, forgetfulness, being not as motivated, whatever, now it's a pathology. And it's like, no. Or depression. It's like, you can have a bad day, but if you have a bad day and every time you have a bad day, you're like, oh God, I'm about to have a major depressive episode. Guess what? The irony of that, you can actually start to have a major depressive episode if you focus intently on the fact that you might
spiral into it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so, I mean, a lot of our job is teaching people how to be aware of their condition and how to frame it. And my God, the framing, you need to know how to frame it depending on multiple contexts. How do I frame it? How do you frame it when you are depressed? How do you frame it when you're happy? How do you frame it when you're tired? And then largely figuring out how do you, person who has a diagnosis, determine when it's your pathology and when it is you're a human being. And you actually could probably push yourself a bit more, and you don't need to do this. You don't need to throw yourself into the bucket of,
I feel like I'm closer to that than I was. I feel like that was a big, so I got diagnosed just last year. And that was a really, really big focus of just like of this year being like, okay, what is what? Because on one hand, this explained my entire childhood and then some, and all of the things that like my parents called me and all that other stuff. But on the other hand, like how I've been able to make it this far without knowing that something was going on that somebody can put a label on at all. Right. It's fantastic because I have this label and then we all, like my husband is now like, oh, we get it. It's an executive function problem. All right. So why don't I try to be more patient with you when this thing happens? But that doesn't mean he's like totally going to let me off the hook if I'm standing and talking on my phone and also doing this and also talking to him and So, but finding that balance of I'm doing this because this is the only way my brain functions versus I made a mistake for my just for my I feel like I'm getting better at it and identifying it.
Awesome.
But
and the big thing I say to my clients is as long as you're working on it and you're actually trying the tools, you shouldn't feel guilty. But if someone gets diagnosed with ADHD and they're not using tools, right? Again, their brain is not going to do Post-it notes and agendas in their head. So they're going to have to do ones in the real life. They're going to have to rely on them. They're going to have to rely on alarms and all sorts of things, right? So it's, exactly.
No, I'm not done.
Let's say you get diagnosed with,
I'm not done.
You need far less than that. That is a mess.
No. So this one, I have an explanation. This one is notes. This one is a to-do list. This one is anything relating to emotional issues. So like my therapy notes I put in here.
That's your mood journal.
Yeah. There you go. And then these are all of my ideas. And they have to be separate.
I thought those were 4 agendas. You need 1. You are doing the opposite of what you should be doing. But here's the deal. Let's say you get diagnosed with ADHD. You're in a fight with your wife. Let me think of something. Okay.
Do you need an example? Because I have some.
you are supposed to call your wife at 6 every day. Let's say that, okay? And you keep forgetting. And your wife says, every time you forget, it makes me feel like you don't love me or care about my feelings. No, honey, it's just I have ADHD. I'm so sorry. Okay. Maybe the first time you got to go. But now it is, you need to do something about it. So what we just learned is stop subscribing to the myth that your brain will remind you. It's not going to. So you need to set a reminder in your phone. If you're not setting a reminder in your phone, you are being a bad husband. That is not ADHD anymore. That is you decided I'm not going to do anything about it. And I'm just going to say I have ADHD. Your wife needs her to tell you there is nothing that stops an ADHD person from setting a daily reminder to go off on their phone. Nothing. So now you should feel guilty. Right. So I will have people where I am telling my clients you should feel guilty about that. Because why didn't you set an alarm? Your wife said it was very important to her, very important. This was the one thing she wanted you to do. I told you to set a phone alarm. We set it in here and you turned it off. Why did you turn it off? I didn't want to do it. Okay, well, that's fine. And that's certainly motivation is harder. But guess what? You made the decision in that moment when it went off. You said, I'm choosing not to call my wife and show her that I love her. And even though she asked me, where
that's
does
the
different.
emotional burden go, right? Is that kind of it? Like, where am I? Am I making my illness somebody else's burden to deal with? Like, now my wife has to call me at 6 o'clock every day because I keep forgetting, so she has to now remember instead of me, and now it's her problem, and it's her extra thing that she's taking on as a way to make up for something that I should be doing, or that I could be doing if I put in a little bit more effort.
Right.
It's interesting.
Right. You do have to call people on it sometimes, right? You have to try.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
All
hard
right,
to try.
my
Anyway.
husband can tune out now. Thank you.
Leave, Mr. Mxiety.
What are you doing here?
His name is MX Producer. If you see him in chat, that'd be who it is.
Oh, fair.
We have there's a reason he's on the production team. I don't know if he's gonna pop in. Probably not. He might have walked away from the screen. But I love you, hubby.
There's a lot of super solid comments.
I'm so glad.
Should I slow down so that we can address them more? I feel bad because people are saying really awesome stuff.
People are just amazing, period. Like, this whole community is freaking amazeballs, and I am catching all of your comments and I'm reading them. And you can respond to, you are also a streamer. Here's links. You can respond to whatever the heck you want. And then we have questions.
Okay.
That's the thing, is we have questions in queue.
Oh, cool. Oh, wait. How do I? Okay, maybe you'll read those out. I don't know how to see that. And if anybody has any questions for me after this, more than welcome on Twitter to ask me. Anyway.
There you go. Yep. Okay. Fuzro Doc asks, with the DSM and the WHO, for example, updating definitions, how do clinicians balance updates, research versus their own experience and therapy sessions? Great question, Fuzro Doc. Great question.
So the biggest change, wait, are we talking, so you were specifically saying the DSM-5 compared to the WHO and trying to make decisions therein? Is that what you were saying?
So Fuzro Doc is asking, so you get all of these, you're watching these updates and people are saying, oh, ADHD is now ADHD and not ADD, right? And you hear all of that and you're like, okay, cool. Now I have to reprogram this. It's totally cool. I'm learning. And then the WHO comes out and goes, oh, actually gaming disorder is a thing now. And then you have to balance that. So it's knowing all of those things, like the book smarts versus your practice. How do you balance that?
So the WHO, World Health Organization, is actually not a diagnostic or statistical manual. It is a guideline for the world on how to make.
I'm assuming they mean the ICD. That's what I'm going to assume.
I'm going to clarify.
Okay,
exactly
sorry.
The one that we get out of the WHO that takes a lot of advice from the WHO is the ICD, the International Classification of Diseases. So in our country, we can use either for a diagnosis. We use what are called F codes. Whenever you come see us, we sign a thing on the sheet and we use an ICD and F code. That's your diagnosis. Your anxiety, 41.1. F code, circle it. That goes off to insurance. You're good to go. Gaming disorder will be in the ICD 11. And it allows you're welcome to use it, right? If you want to use it to help get somebody insurance coverage for some program that may be helpful, go for it. And if you don't want to, then you don't have to. They're all built around some research. To be clear, all of them are built around research, but there is a debate of how to interpret that research sometimes, the rigor of the research, who is involved in conducting the research. And then there are some politics where terminology, the connotation of terms are considered. Okay, let's take Asperger's. Mm-hmm. Asperger's is still a diagnosis in the ICD-10, but it is not a diagnosis in the DSM-5.
Great example.
All that was collapsed into autism spectrum disorders. Asperger's would be ASD level 1, or it could fall under something called social pragmatic communication disorder. Now, I will still code Asperger's all day long. And I did, my dissertation was how on high functioning autism and Asperger's were remarkably different, right? Okay. They're remarkably different in many ways. That was my dissertation. Was very hard. And I was among some people to make the argument that we need to keep Asperger's. And the big push for why they changed it was, well, there's been a nice bit of positive chatter about Asperger's. It's becoming to be seen as this non-stigmatized thing. We would like that to transfer to autism. That's that. And we were like, what are you doing? It's not the same. And there's to give you even more, there is something that occurs when people say celebrate autism. There is a massive group of people with low functioning autistic children who are like, stop with this terminology. Some of us are just trying to get by, and we're not celebrating our child who's 40 IQ, can't function in the world. You're celebrating Aspies, and you're being incredibly inconsiderate to us who have children who don't fall into that category. They're not going to be Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Thomas Jefferson or any of these people, you know? And so it really is just a lot of politics. You hope more research. You want to be sensitive, and even well-intentioned sensitivities can lead, like the Aspie thing, can lead to really big problems, you know? So it's just so complicated, and we're trying our best. Well, not everyone. Some of us are trying our best.
I genuinely believe that people are trying their best, and if they're not, they can. They can try. If they're not trying their best, then at any given time they can start trying and do their best.
I'd agree with that. I do not agree that everyone's trying their best, but I do agree that everyone.
Listen, you have way more experience with people not trying their best. So how about? I mean, I've encountered again shitload of people who are not trying their best, but I strongly believe in the people that I've encountered, I think in their twisted way, they genuinely believe that they're trying. Like they're doing their best in a way that makes sense to them.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm specifically thinking about like my narcissistic parents. Like that is what I'm throwing out there. Because I think in their mind, in that mindset, like I'm doing my best and they're not going to change. So it's a matter of me being like, you're doing your best, so I'm going to go over here and not be next to your best.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I was diagnosed with Asperger's without being told as a child. Got ASD diagnosis as an adult. I personally hate Asperger's as a label. Hate being called an Aspie. My family held it over me for awful reasons. Well, that's another thing because it's a label that was very negative for you. Okay, all right. We know you have a truck.
Don't take it then. This is what's great, Sweet Justice, because I feel you. Don't identify as it, right? You really don't. The only place that I would say you need to identify is on your insurance form, so you get whatever thing you need paid for. Or if something happened to you, I'd want you to be protected by the American Disability Act. And so the fact that you're logged somewhere, there's some that you'd be able to be protective if you got fired for something that had to do with social deficits.
Well, this person is Australian, but point still stands, I think.
Oh, how do you know that? Oh, their name?
I just
you know this person.
Yeah.
I was like, did I miss something?
How do you know people in your community? What is this?
Well, yeah, so not 88, but... I'm sorry.
That is solid advice. See, they said it's solid advice. So yeah. I'm just teasing you because I can. Yeah, people over-victimize themselves. They may not know that they have choices in how to respond now, and they won't take responsibility for their own actions. That's an interesting take. I'm reading all your takes. Phil D said, I just realized this homie is great. Phil, thanks. I'm sorry it took you so long to realize it, because this homie is pretty great. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Convo lot. Great convo. I thought it was a link. Thank you so much for the compliment. If you put a period and don't put a space, it thinks it's a link and deletes it, but I see the compliment. Thank you very much. Okay. Gearwolf asks, are you ready for the next question, or did you have more to say?
No, lay it on me.
All right. So I've been diagnosed with ADHD, severe depression. What is the likelihood of having borderline personality disorder? Or could it just be a crossover of symptoms from something I'm already dealing with?
Well, it's all right. So borderline personality disorder. Can you give me a bit of reasons why you're worried about it?
Yeah, Gearwolf, let's hear from you if you don't mind.
If you don't mind, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
if possible. Yeah. All right. And then Treffley, we can. Oh, Gearwolf, I thought I did something. Oh no, you did nothing wrong. I'm so sorry. I constantly get education lessons from Dr. Space Cowboy, and I'm blown away. I have to read the whole thing. Dr. Kelly, and I'm blown away for how smart and pragmatic he is. Agreed.
Aw,
Agreed.
thank you.
Gearwolf, any clarification would be fantastical
Yes.
before we get to the next question. I'm just going to scroll up in chat is what I'm going to do because there was a lot of comments. Hi,
Do that,
Dennis.
girl.
Yeah. You guys are having a fantastic conversation. Maple leaves in the trees. Having a great talk with Wolf Wraith. I think that's really, thank you for that. Go Gearwolf, go. I'm assuming Gearwolf is typing. Type faster. No pressure. I swear. It's all good. But well, I seem to have a lot of overlapping issues, and they seem to lead me to believe that I'm dealing with so much more than what I have been diagnosed with.
So it's possible. So there are a couple terms I want to quickly give you. One is comorbid condition. That's where, let's say M, right? ADHD and anxiety. If you took away the ADHD, she's still anxious. Take away the anxiety, still ADHD. Okay, that's comorbid. They exist independently. An associative condition. That is, you have someone who is anxious. So they're constantly worrying about everything and thinking about what if I fail? And so they can't focus because they're thinking about how they're going to fail or what if I don't do well? So then they fill out some scale that says, I struggle to pay attention, and someone says you have ADHD. But if I handle the anxiety and they're not worrying all the time, they can focus just fine. That is an associative condition. They don't have an ADHD brain. They have an anxiety brain that for a while made them have the same symptoms of ADHD, okay? Then you have, the last term is primary. If you have many conditions, which one is the primary one? If I could remove one, which one would take the most issues and get rid of it? Now, if you
Can
have
you
a
do
number,
that? Sorry, I'm just interested. If that's a service you have, I would like to sign up.
Yeah, it's a full comprehensive battery. We can do that. Yeah. We can
Okay, great. Thanks. All right.
Yeah. So all that being said, when you're trying to figure out what's going on, you know, borderline personality is nine specific symptoms, and it is a personality disorder, something we used to call an axis 2, meaning it's not really neurological. Actually, there's some hereditary inheritance rate to it, but that largely comes from what we call parental modeling. I have a parent who has borderline personality. I learn how to engage in the world like they engage with the world. Their habits become my habits. Now I have developed a borderline personality disorder, right? So it's not like I have a certain allele set that my mother or father gave me that then, you know, activated when I was 13. That's not quite how that goes. So
I had that one. I did that one. I was in college. I was diagnosed with BPD, and then by the end of college, the therapist had told me, she's like, I no longer think you qualify for the diagnosis. And it's the same thing happened with PTSD. But
I'll tell you, and it depends on where you go, right? Like one person might call you bipolar, the other might call you borderline, the other might call you a sinner. I don't know. We have like
centerline.
There are some Christian practices where they'll be like, you don't have a mental health condition, you're a sinner. like
a sinner. I thought you said center, and I was like, that sounds great. That's
you got some demons in you, girl. And you're like,
I've heard of that one.
Dr. K. I'm gonna go see Dr. K. So even then, it's kind of it's hard to find out. Now there will be people, mental health professionals, who will diagnose somebody just in one session. The amount, Asperger's is, for instance, a hot diagnosis right now. Psychologists and so on are just looking for it everywhere. And they will just throw it out. I mean, I know cases where an adult walks in who probably has social anxiety, is a little awkward, but not pathologically, and, you know, and is a nerd, right? And they go into a psychologist.
Well, that's a whole separate condition.
Right.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So they go in and someone says, you have Asperger's. Well, I would come in and say, what did you do to determine that? Because you need a robust set of assessment to truly, truly know, right? Which is why we have to be careful. And so if you just do it from like armchair, like, autism.
Next.
Next. Swing it back, baby. Hold on. Next. Like, this sort of weird production line. a horrible thing. Then if you keep running into production line psychology, you're going to get 1,000 different diagnoses. You know, so I would say this, Gear Wolf, the whole point of a diagnosis, insurance, so that you can afford treatment. For people who do research, to be able to pool together a sample of people who have the similar strengths and weaknesses, to test interventions to see if they work. And then the last is simply to know if it helps inform intervention. If it doesn't inform intervention, or you have these conditions and you kind of know what to do to get help, that the word or the F code doesn't matter so much, right? And if you're worried about borderline personality, the only real huge difference is that it would be less biological, so medicine's not going to be as helpful. It's going to be more habitual and personality based, which can be really a lot tougher, arguably tougher. And you would want to focus more on your fear of rejection, or your cognitive distortions that would be black or white thinking, all or nothing. There's this sort of thing like, I just met James and he's the best person I ever met. James didn't return my text. F James, I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. Like this sort of like all everywhere kind of condition. You would just need to know you need to focus a bit more on that. That's all. Wouldn't change it too much.
I want to address Ms. Tobikai's question from the fact that I don't think we can address it. I don't know if you want to read it as it's leaving.
Post-subarachnoid brain hemorrhage survivor here with a history of seizures, insomnia, paralysis, as well as adult onset ADHD, changes in personality, depression, along with a multitude of changes in cognitive disorders. I was paralyzed neck down following the accident due to damage to my cervical spine. Have you worked with other TBI survivors, and how long can it take to regain normality in sleep rhythm and range of emotions? Very good question. So do you happen to know the focal area of your brain that is necrotic? Any part that might have died, or lesions that developed? I'll answer it broadly until I hear that answer. TBIs, it's kind of interesting because ADHD is a neurological condition that you're born with, and it's genetic. But we will sort of maybe sometimes say adult onset, but you had a traumatic brain injury. So let's say, for example, you had damage to your prefrontal cortex. Well, you are going to struggle in managing your energy and your attention and your inhibition. You're going to be impulsive. You're going to struggle to focus, and your executive functioning is going to be poor. You're going to have probably some similar symptomology ADHD. And the benefit of having that term is some of their interventions are going to work for you, right? I don't know. I hope you're okay with me asking how old you are. It's because the answer kind of depends. Young children have a lot of what's called neuroplasticity. We actually, contrary to what we thought in the 80s, if you have somebody have a TBI, you want it to be young, because the brain can really repair itself in amazing ways. Yeah. My younger brother, he was born and got stuck, and about a quarter of his brain died. And, he had some OT issues and Aspie stuff, and some ADHD. It's about the things that kind of manifested. And now he's still got some stuff, but the brain grew back. If you look at his brain on an MRI, it's still dead. The tissue's dead. It doesn't revive, right? Wow. But the other
parts of the brain start making up for it, right? Yeah.
There's not this right-left brain hemisphere nonsense. Your brain works as a whole.
That still bothers me. I've heard psychologists still say I'm using my right brain, or very left. It bothers me so much because I learned about that in high school. I learned that there's no such thing as right-left brain, so it really bugs me.
That's a myth. So the brain is a whole brain. If your right temporal lobe used to do it and then that dies, well, guess what? Your left temporal lobe is probably going to pick up the slack, right? So I want to make sure that. But as far as it coming back, it depends on your age. It depends on you're young, okay? Much better than one has. So I thought, I made this very nice. So the fact is, if you are younger than 29, you are going to continue to get better at least until your low 30s. If you're older than 33, and I don't know when your injury was, I hope I didn't forget that, you might might be peaking a little bit, but it should still be able to get a little better.
Tricked me into learning stuff again.
Along the temporal, frontal lobe, and intracranial area. If you love visual imaging, that'd be fun. I could take a peek. I did that for 2 years. That's pretty cool. Anyway, so I hope I answered that well.
That one was hard to. I didn't think you'd take it on at all. Not from the perspective of like you can't, but I was just like, I don't know if we could say anything that I don't want to promise anybody anything, you know. Treffley asks, so can someone develop a mental illness by thinking they have it, either through self-diagnosis or incorrect diagnosis?
Oh yeah.
That's a good question.
They're not going to develop the brain, right? Again,
Right.
when we talk about neurodiversity, we're talking about differences in the brain. Biological depression, biological anxiety, biological ADHD. So you're not going to cause that. But can you create conditions where if you hyper focus on it in like kind of a histrionic way, believe you have it, and then start to have cognitive habits that someone with biological anxiety would have? Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Got you. Do you guys have more questions? I saw more questions, but you can't put more than one question into chat at a time, into the thing at a time, so because it won't track you. So if y'all have more questions, I would love to hear them. But we still do have a bunch of. I hope I don't mess this up. Okay, I did not mess it up, so that's cool. I want to make sure to go back to our Twitch chat, Twitter chat. First of all, here is all of Dr. Kelly's links again. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. Yeah. Can we talk about the whole myth that neurodiversity is just like not real, or that mental health concerns aren't a thing? Because I've had somebody literally tell me that. We kind of touched upon it, but I want more.
No, you're right. This one I have to temper myself because I get very frustrated. But I also recognize it's largely out of non-malicious ignorance that it derives. It's not debatable. Let me give you an idea. Imagine you have someone who hurts their foot, their ankle.
Okay.
And you see some black and blue. There's some sensitivity. The lack of function. And they say, is it broken? It's okay. Well, maybe. There are some things that make me think maybe it's broken. I can't guarantee it, but maybe. Then you go get an x-ray. You look at the bone and you say, yeah, there's a fracture along the tibia head. It's broken. It's a broken bone. All right. Guys, the brain is not much different. If I've got someone who has all the symptoms of, let's say, depression. If I have someone who has all the symptoms of depression, and it's pretty chronic, it's pretty patterned. They have moments of dysthymia, of like mild depression, moments of severe depression, history of suicidality. It occurs even though nothing bad's happening in their life. They'll feel good. They'll be on vacation. And out of nowhere, they'll just be depressed, which informs me that it's most likely non-reactive, meaning it's a neurochemical malfunction going on at that moment, not someone said something mean to me and now I'm sad. That's reactive.
Right.
Depression is, you don't need anything to trigger it. It just happens. Right.
Fun time.
All right. Yes. Yeah. So you have all this. And then I say, well, let's do an MRI. Let's do a functional MRI. Let's look at the brain. Let's look to see how blood flow is existing in the brain, which informs activity. Let's see how glucose metabolism in the brain is occurring, which again suggests activity. Let's look at volume in certain areas. And let's see if this person has what's called a functional neuroanatomical profile that other people with depression have. All right. They say they're depressed. All right, I got the image. I got this brain up. I'm looking through. First thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to look at the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. We're going to call it just the VMPFC for short. All right. I know this area has direct and indirect links with the limbic system, which has to do with emotion. And the VMPFC has to do with processing and regulating emotion. Oh, wow. This person has a ton of activity going on at resting state. Nothing's being done. Nothing's happening. And I see a massive amount of activity. Okay, let me check also the dorsal. Oh, I'll use my little guy. I'll use my little psychomancer.
Yay, psychomancer!
Ventral medial, push real hard up into his brain. Ventral medial prefrontal cortex, right? And I say, you know what? Let me also look at his dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, right there on both sides. Let me see what's going on there. Oh, that's interesting. Hypoactivity. It's not hardly activated. Well, that's the area that has to do with executive functioning and regulating the VMPFC. All right, so I'm looking at the brain and I see an overactive thing that causes more negative emotions and an underactive thing that's supposed to manage it. Yeah, this person has clinical depression. Yes, they do.
So, but do you need to see it on the MRI?
Well, here's the thing. 50% of people have a diagnosable mental health condition in their life.
Right.
In the US alone, that's going to be like 170 million scans. And really, you probably need 2 scans a piece. So around 340 million scans for each person. That's not possible. It's incredibly expensive. I've never seen an MRI with contrast lower than $1,500 with insurance, right? So this is not realistic, right? It's not realistic for everybody to get it. Now, if I happen to have somebody that was incredibly factitious and malingering, or it was a court case, and someone was making these claims, and they said, I did this awful thing because of this depression, and there's no history of it, and we're thinking they're malingering or whatever. Yeah, we're gonna take a look. Let's take a look.
Okay,
right?
gotcha.
Let's take a look. Now, if I get but the reality is, if I get, it's a confirmatory scan. If I get something that doesn't have exactly what I just said, it doesn't mean necessarily they don't have depression, but it points in the area of, I'm not seeing any biology up here that suggests that they're experiencing random moments of unregulated sadness.
Understood.
Right?
Understood.
Yeah.
Lychee Jelly, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome in, new peeps. Appreciate you. My name is Mxiety. I'm a mental health talk show host. We interview experts, mental health experts, as well as people who live with various mental health conditions. We're not doing that. We have open topic discussions on mental health. And when we're not doing that, we have cute Good News Fridays. So I'm so glad that you stopped by. With me today is Dr. Kelly, and he is debunking the best of the worst of the worst of the best mental health myths.
Crushed it.
Yeah, crushed it. Welcome, Raiders. Yes, you're welcome here. Yes. Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Next question.
Can I say one more thing that's kind of cool?
Yeah, all of the things.
So is the neuro boring? Is it boring, the neuro stuff? Just tell me.
No. Well, but I'm also you're talking to the wrong audience. Okay. I'm the person who would think that's cool.
Yeah, so, I suppose. Yeah, that's true.
You're asking. You can ask chat like, hey, is the neuro stuff a little boring? And then we can.
It. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. All right. I'll say one more thing. So let's say someone pops in and says, well, yeah, but the VMPFC and the DLPFC, yeah, but that's just correlational, right? They chose to be depressed and then their brain turned into that.
Sure. We
know it's not. We have a lot of traumatic brain injury studies where we look at specific areas that have been damaged. Let's take 2. The VMPFC. We had a study where we took Vietnam veterans who had very focal damage to their brain. We basically looked at the MRI. We looked for where black spots exist that suggest necrotic or dead brain tissue. And then we sort of say, what's going on with functioning? For people who had damage to their VMPFC, the part of the prefrontal cortex that has to do with processing and feeling emotions, felt less depression. Now, we don't want to just go in there and do like a lobotomy on anyone who's sad, because that area is involved with a lot of things. Right?
Yeah, you get no emotions then.
No, we have some deep brain stimulators that can go in there and sort of for really incredibly depressed people that help out. But anyway, so that had decreased depression. Then we saw people who had damage in their dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the area that's supposed to manage those negative emotions. And they had increased depression, never had a diagnosis of depression, and now are terribly depressed. So it's not just, we're not just dealing with correlational data. That's causal, right? Not I didn't, but something happened where like clink, that area died. Let's look at what happens. They're depressed now. Or they're not as depressed now, right? So it's, just to be clear, there is no doubt that these mental health conditions are not neurological. They are absolutely neurological. I probably did a double negative there. They absolutely are neurological. We have hard facts. It's acting like x-rays don't exist. It's so silly. But be patient with people, because this information doesn't get out there as much as it
should. Yeah. Well, we've talked about this kind of. I want to get to our question, but I have to. Trigger warning for scientific folk. Anti-vaxxers.
Oh no. You an anti-vaxxer?
What, me? No.
Yeah.
Of course
I thought
not.
you were like raising your hand like this girl right here.
No.
Right.
I said trigger warning specifically because I know Chad is gonna be like, "Wah!" No,
I got you.
No, thank the Lord. We talked about this before, Chad. This is why you do these pre-screening calls, and then you're gonna accuse me of such terrible things.
I didn't accuse you. I asked because I wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand. Because listen, if you're an anti-vaxxer, I'm not going to sit here and judge you or treat you poorly.
I'm just going to log off and never come back onto your stream.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Even
Wait, are you an anti-vaxxer? Is that why you're like, listen, I got nothing. No. Okay, good.
Listen, I have a friend of mine, brilliant friend, went to NYU Law, incredible corporate lawyer, did not vaccinate her children because of a belief, keyword belief, that it causes problems. So there are incredibly smart, wise, educated people who still believe this myth. They're all around me. I see it all the time.
But it's so easy to believe it. It's like believing that GMOs are bad. It's somebody went and told you, this is bad for your family. Who in their right mind after that is like, no, sign me up. I believe in things, so sign me up. Like, that's, fear wins out every time. You told me that I'm hurting my family. I don't want to do that.
Well, in trends as well. I mean, if no offense, but if people believe in non-celiac gluten sensitivity, that's not a thing. We know it's not a thing. The studies that came out to say people are allergic to gluten and whatever, it's not real unless you have celiac disease.
Right.
Now, there is some research on what's called FODMAPs, and that's
right, and how your body reacts and is inflamed if you eat certain foods. Yep.
But people will all the time, again, very educated people be like, no, I don't eat that. I'm sensitive to gluten. And my sister-in-law who's celiac disease is like, that's an example of like someone who maybe has depression, and then someone with factitious disorder says something. It's sort of like, you get out of here.
I don't want you. Let's just stop talking. Let's just stop talking. But it's not. I think the main issue with we're going back and we're all over the place.
Vaccines.
But vaccines. But the main issue with somebody who's making something up or is saying something in terms of like, oh, I have a little bit. I'm not superstitious. I'm a little stitious. Like,
but I'm a little stitious.
I'm still a little stitious. Yeah. So somebody who says like something among those lines, I don't think it's up to people on Twitter, on Twitch. It's definitely not up to me on this side of the screen reading text that you wrote to judge whether or not you are making something up and being factitious. And that's where my approach comes from.
It depends on who you are, right? If you don't know the person, why are you doubting them, right? But at the same time, it's a bit confusing because we have something called social penetration theory. When you first meet somebody, you talk about weather, movies, get to know them a little more, maybe you talk about your family, friends, and really you're not talking about your deepest emotions until you trust somebody. So it is confusing when someone blares out publicly, like these kind of things. It's hard to know how to react for certain people, right? Because they just got thrown to the middle of the onion. Right? They just got thrown to the middle where they're like, well, so how do I react? And they have two choices here. Well, three. Either just sidestep it and be like, I'm not going to address it because I don't really know them. Why am I going to do anything?
Right.
Confirm it and say, I believe what you're saying is right. Or refute it and be like, well, I don't know. There are some things that make me think that's wrong. Right. And it's a thing where if I were to say, go with one safely, I would say just look, you don't know them. Just you don't need to maybe say anything unless if you don't know them.
I'm kind of more black and white. So where I would say, and listen, I'm not a professional, so
Sure.
I have that to hide behind.
Sure.
My ignorance is justified. So I would say it depends on your background experience. Have you had a lot of people with fictitious disorder ruin, the whole idea for you? Then yeah,
part of it.
your first reaction is probably going to be like, no, you're full of shit, because mostly people like that are full of shit.
That would probably be theirs.
But if you have a full experience full of compassion, or you're trying to move your life towards compassion, there's no reason to at least not entertain the thought that this person is hurting and needs help.
Well, not really, because if you have someone with a factitious disorder and you always enable it, you're enabling, you're allowing that to exist further.
Oh,
and
no,
making
we're
their life
talking about
worse.
somebody you just met. No, absolutely. If somebody continues, pooping
Right.
on you and
But-
crying wolf, that's very different.
But in either way, you're assuming a diagnosis based upon what they say, right?
Ah.
So like you're either assuming they have depression or you're assuming they have factitious disorder. One is more sensitive, right? But it's not necessarily better, because if there's someone who has a maladaptive coping skill of, getting certain kind of relief for their factitious disorder publicly, and it's entertained, well, we might be doing them a disservice, right? We're being very sensitive, they feel heard, but we might be doing a disservice. So I'm not saying go out and doubt people. That's not the way to go about it.
Oh, I don't think you are. I want to make sure I didn't think that. Yeah.
Right, yeah. But it's something where we can't be so kind of like, if I'm validating emotion, then it must be good, because it's actually not always the case. And there are times where your position might not be to be the validator. You might not be in a position where you should be the validator. It doesn't mean you need to invalidate,
Right.
but it's sort of like, you probably should talk about this with maybe someone like a close friend of yours, or have you thought about seeing a therapist and someone who's trained to
Right.
chat with, or
Right.
whatever it is. So
Yeah.
it's very complicated when you're on the public forum, and boundaries are very all over the place a bit, right? I mean, it's like, let's say you were in the grocery store and you were checking out, and someone's like, how are you? It's like, man, I am so lonely, and I'm very depressed, and I'm worried I'm going to harm myself tonight. The grocer would be like,
So that's $5.99.
right. They'd be like, I'm uncomfortable because I'm not sure what to do here.
Right.
Right. Like, I'm a grocer.
Right.
I'm not trained to address that. I don't know you very well. Right. And then maybe they keep coming in, so they think they have a relationship. Well, I see this grocer all the time. And so I mean, it's just very complicated, because social communication styles and boundaries and so on get really murked up on public domains, which is really hard. It can be good, it can be bad.
Fusra Doc's comments are all on small talk. He's like, oh, let me tell you about smart talk. Exploratory. Okay, hold on. This is really interesting stuff. Orientation stage of SPTA doesn't have to be small talk, but getting into relatable, unrelatable topics without getting in deep, vulnerable topics about your identity. Whereas exploratory affective stage and affective stage does get into more about person's identity, but the outer layers of social penetration can get into topics that we feel are safe. Again, not necessarily small talk, although orientation stage might contain it. Much of the reason of small talk consists around removing uncertainty reduction.
Bam. Also called social onion theory. That's what Shrek was talking about.
And we all know the great
We love
therapist
Shrek. The great Shrek. Dr. Shrek.
Dr. Shrekerton.
Dr. O'Grey.
Oh, Shrek O'Grey. That's oh man.
Shrek O'Grey. Yeah, boy.
Yeah. That reminds me of Mario and Luigi Mario. That's onions have layers.
Onions have layers.
Okay. How about a parfait? Everybody love parfait. All right.
Do we want to talk vaccines? Do we want to?
Oh yeah. I'm so sorry. So we can get into vaccines, but we have 3 other questions. So basically,
hear 'em.
guys, please vaccinate. I don't know. Do we have to? Is there more there? Is there more there? You said
Vaccinate your children, please.
Please don't let them die.
You love your kids, don't you? Just vaccinate, please.
Yeah. No, and Bliffle makes a really good point. Like, you'd rather have a kid that's dead than on the spectrum. Really, that's brutal.
It's just roll with it. Yeah, roll with it. Yeah. Sure, it causes autism. Better than death.
Yeah, exactly. Bliffle is an onion. What a twist. Bliffle has been an onion this whole time. Yeah, exactly. Shrek Ogre MD. Parfaits also have layers. Yummy layers. So to put in a very simple way, small talk equals icebreaker in a personal way. So reducing tension. Correct.
Yeah.
Tony
Good way to say
Celeste,
it.
that is correct. Onion is me. It's true now that it's out. Bliff, I'm sorry, your secret came out. I didn't identify you. Okay, so
Siegward? Is that you, Siegward? I know Fusro gets that. Onion Knight! Bliffle Splick! Where is your Onion Knight armor? I don't know if anyone gets that reference. That's fine. Keep going.
you know what? I don't, but I'm like worried that I should.
No, it's a. Did you ever play the Dark Souls series?
No, I didn't. I was worried that it was
okay.
a reference to Monty Python, and I was like, no, I would know the Monty Python reference.
Sweet Justice has got it.
Okay.
Sweet Justice has got it.
Got it.
Oh, That's for the Dark Souls people. Anyway,
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, vaccinate your kids. What is the main reason that you would say? So somebody's armed with, so somebody comes up to you and goes, "Oh, how dare you vaccinate your children, you monster." What can you say back to them?
Oh, they are, okay. I'm going to say nothing.
Pass.
Let me, okay, so here's the deal.
That's what you just look at them directly in the face and go, pass, and then walk away.
Just make the motion like you're swiping right. He's not leaving. Leave! Why are you leaving? Oh, God, well, I must have been vaccinated.
Oh, man.
So I probably wouldn't say anything to them because the idea is they're not operating on facts. They're operating on belief. And here's a very big difference here. Belief or faith is certainty without proof. Science is proof without certainty. As scientists, we will always, no matter how strong a claim is, leave some room for error, standard error, and leave room for someone to come along and falsify it. We're not going to be dogmatic. Well, you hope, I mean, some are, but by the method, you shouldn't. A belief, facts aren't going to do anything. And again, they are certain. There's nothing to do with the science.
Yeah.
So you could try to entertain their beliefs, and you could try to see what their experiences were that led to it. And you could try to you have like ethos, pathos, logos to argue with somebody. You could try to connect with their sentiment and come alongside them, not refute them, not provide. But I don't have the time for that. You kidding me? I got 2 young children. So I'm going to be like, pass. But if you try to convince someone of the alternative, the only way to do it is going to try to access their pathos, to try to reach their sentiment, figure out where the belief came from, not the fact, the faith that they have that vaccines cause autism, and see if you can kind of chip away at it. But if you try to argue with them, they're just going to believe it more. We call it the backfire effect. They'll believe even more that it's true. Right. Beliefs, that's how beliefs work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the way it happened, right? So if you think about this we learned a lot from this autism and vaccine, the way it unraveled. It's quite amazing. So here you go. Ready? Here's the journey. I feel like it's a children's book. One day, Dr. Andrew Wakefield, 1998, a study is published by Dr. Andrew Wakefield. He's a gastroenterologist, and they were studying correlations between MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps vaccine,
rubella,
and thank you, and bowel disease. There was some indicator. Now, they also looked at some gut-related conditions, including autism, because there's some gut-related aspects to autism. And the article itself did not say there was a link. However, Dr. Andrew, a friend of ours, he made a video at the same time that said it was related. And it was published in The Lancet, the article, and then he made this video. Then news outlets sweep to it. Sensational news! Autism is caused by vaccines! And then everyone was like super excited, and the whole atmosphere was like chattering, and people kind of wanted it to be a thing because it was so exciting.
But it was an explanation. People want simple explanations.
Everybody wants the idea that, it's this because of something you already know. It's like, oh, I knew it. I can control MMR.
In a similar vein, but not too similar, is back to video game addiction being a disorder. Like, instead of figuring out what's causing my kid to, excessively play video games, I'm just going to say that he has a disorder and send him off to a doctor, because that's what seems like, that seems like a thing to do. That seems like an easy way to figure out, I don't have to take care, like I don't have to do anything. The media said this, so I'm just gonna go and send them off. It's doctor time.
Or the opposite, where I love video games, I can never see that they would be bad, so I'm never going to consider they're problematic, right? It's you have like paradigms, and we call it confirmation bias, right? You're like, I'm going to reject things that refute my bias, and I'm going to accept things that confirm it, right? It definitely exists, and scientists are not immune to this. They're not. We know we are.
Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, because that doesn't really make sense to me.
That's right. But so you have this happen in '98. Everybody comes to it. And then a ton of grant funding that should have gone toward other things to help out autism go towards studying vaccines. Hundreds of studies say we're finding nothing. So then they look further into it and they see, wow, in 1997, Wakefield got a patent on an alternative to vaccines and was being paid by attorneys who were suing the vaccine companies to provide information of why it's bad. So if he can prove that vaccines are bad, he will be able to corner the market on his alternative, and he will continue to be paid by these attorneys. And they were like, well, that was a conflict of interest that was not reported in his proposal. Now let's look even further and see if some of this data was fraudulent. So they went back to the families, and he frauded data everywhere. It's like all over the place. It was a mess. There was nothing valid from this man. He would ignore existing conditions and say they never said it, and then say they only existed after the vaccine. He would say, I mean, it was so incredibly corrupt. The article was pulled in 2010. Wakefield lost his medical degree, not able to practice in Britain. We've done more and more studies to say that it's not a thing. And yet educated, brilliant people are still subscribing to the trendy belief that I'm going to, at worst, not vaccinate my kid, at best, have them on a delayed schedule. Which that was basically the American Association of Pediatrics compromise. We'll create a delayed schedule that makes you feel better about it, but there's no benefit to it. But whatever, vaccinate your children, please.
But please, just anything. What'll make you come in? Delayed schedule, come on it. That no problem. Yep, you can do it on a delayed schedule. I know that. I touched the nerve. I touched the nerve. Doc. I'm sorry. The media angrily shakes uncontrollably. Hate that overgeneralization that people make about local, regional, state, national. There is incredible journalism out there, but the sensationalization of it is huge. And yeah, I guess scapegoating is what I should be blaming. That's I know that Mxiety is just making an example of people establishing belief on news article that they read. Yeah, I'm sorry. No. You were just making an example. I'm not mad at you. You can be mad at me. It's totally okay. I can accept that you're mad at me and learn something and then walk away from this going, okay, maybe I should be more considerate of that generalization and be more specific next time. You can be mad. It's okay.
Well, and I think it's, I think one thing, devil's advocate here, we were talking about confirmation bias. There is something to keep in mind. There are absolutely great journalists, and I love the ones that will put the news outlets on that spectrum of accurate comments, whether they're left-leaning, right-leaning, how accurate scientifically are their comments or whatever. I love that one, right? Those things to see what to watch. And absolutely, some are better than others. But I think something for media is they are invested in getting viewership, and that's what their company is. And even a good journalist works for a capitalistic company.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean it's bad, but it means it is a bias that they have to recognize. I am going to feel pressured to cover something that's going to get a lot of clicks or be sensational. And I love seeing journals where I read the title and they very obviously made the title not sensational. I'm like, good for you, because they lost some clicks by making it a logical, rational title.
So
as opposed to, is autism killing your dog?
Yeah, yeah. Is the sponge in your kitchen murdering you? More at 8.
Right. Where it's a fine, normal title, and you're like,
I
good for you.
feel like I have to disclose here that I'm a journal editor. That's what I do. So
Yeah.
I worked for John Wiley for 5 years, and now I work for another company, which I prefer not to disclose, but it's another medical publishing company. And so my job, literally part of my job, is to make sure that I don't hear about advertisers or who is providing us with money, so that I can make sure that whoever doctor that I'm interviewing later for an article, there's plausible deniability of them knowing that this advertiser, so I should say nice things about this drug or whatever the heck it is.
Right.
So,
well, and it's fun, like academic journals aren't held as, they're not as, I think, swayed by capitalism, but they are swayed by, you know,
there is so much other issues fraught there.
Oh my God.
There's misogyny, and there's plenty of other crap. That's fine.
Dozens. Here's the one that bothers me the most. I have spent my life proving this point. I will ignore any studies that refute this point, and I am going to continue to do studies to try to prove this point. You just stopped being a scientist and you became an advocate of whatever that point is. Your point is to be neutral as a scientist. So if you are doing studies only to prove, let's say video games, I'm only going to do studies that I believe will prove they're good. And you're not ever doing studies to prove that they could be problematic, like robust studies of whatever. We have a problem. If every single study of yours points to the same conclusion every time, I mean, even climate change results don't all say climate change is real. We know it's real, but there's still like, what, 98 of them that like say it's inconclusive or not real.
But they no, they don't say. They usually
something.
None of them say it's not real. They usually, I mean, maybe not none of them.
True.
I haven't read all
of them.
I haven't read all. I know that there's some research out there, but I believe that most of them usually say it's non-conclusive. Like, I've read articles that will tell you that there's going to be, like, you know, Irene and Katrina type hurricanes coming now, like, biannually at this point. And they're going to continue getting more and more progressive. And then in the end of that article, that was all it was proving. And in the end of that article, they're like, yeah, but we like really don't know. So
usually it's an issue of metric. In mental health, the equivalent is trying to measure depression, and you're asking 5 questions about suicidality. And then you say, no one was depressed. You're like, no one was suicidal.
Yeah.
There were a lot who could have been depressed. You didn't capture it.
Right. And so that's happening with surveys right now when they're asking. They're like, is more of America anxious? And they're like, well, there's a pandemic, but they're not anxious, but they're anxious.
Well, you know, and then gosh, even that's a complicated one.
It is.
Like, we did a survey at a high school, and over a third of that high school met criterion for clinical anxiety, but it doesn't represent that they all have clinically anxious brains.
Right.
It represents other things. And I had a kid 2 days ago. I love this kid. He is a 13-year-old gay male. He's gotten past a lot of the difficulty of his sexual orientation. Still exists, obviously. But you know, he's really come out of the tougher parts of it.
Aww.
But he's not melodramatic at all. He does not exaggerate anything. He just very by the book, and made a complaint where he's like, it turns out he has anxiety, and he goes, that word means nothing now. Like, what do you mean? He's like, it's such a trend. Everyone's anxious. You say you're anxious to your friend, your 13-year-old friend, and they'll be like, oh, me too. And then, how anxious are you? Well, I'm this anxious. Well, I'm anxious that I want to die. I wish I was anxious as you, because that would be a relief for me. And it's like there is a trend a bit of, you know, and that's a whole other issue. That is a cultural issue, right? That is an issue of a world that is increasingly dichotomized, increasingly threatening. There's some glorification of frailty that exists in our culture. It comes with some good stuff. But, you know, there are some things that are within our culture that sort of eat away at grit and resilience a bit. And so now you got over a third lighting up where if they were in my office and I gave them a standardized scale that they filled out, clinically anxious. But I know this kid should not be littered with medicine.
Right.
You know what I mean? And medicine's not going to help him, you know?
Right.
No, it's a bit of a mess.
It's a mess. Yeah, that's the bottom. I mean, there's no bottom line, but if there is a bottom line, it's that there is a mess.
do
Oh,
that.
we have so many questions. I'm
Oh my gosh,
so
slam on me.
sorry. Oh my
We'll
god.
rattle them off. We'll rattle
I'm
them
so
off.
sorry.
We'll
And then
crush it.
eventually we have to let you, go on and take care of the dogs and the screaming children.
Oh, they're all asleep by now.
They just,
My lovely wife took care of it.
oh, they thank her from me, please. I appreciate that. I know that's
do.
not easy. Wolf Wraith asks, I wanted to ask, does insurance cover your VR therapy, and do you work with ketamine treatment?
VR does, insurance does cover my VR therapy. And so ketamine is an interesting bag. I won't go into it entirely. The research is kind of mixed. The idea is that you shouldn't just feel good when it happens, but it should give you 3 months of relief, and it should help rewire the brain a bit for people who have failed 3 other medicinal treatments for depression. I know anesthesiologists who will endorse it all over the place. But again, conflict of interest, that is a huge money racket for them. It takes no time, and they get paid like oodles to give you a little nose spray once every 3 months. So you can't really be super listening to all. You have to question if an anesthesiologist is the one telling you. They're not bad people. They're human beings. And so that's what's going to happen. So it's, and then as far as people who I've seen, and I see people who are kind of very troubled, so they failed a lot of medicine, or medicine has failed them. I'm not seeing a lot of effects. I'm seeing about what the research says. Too soon to give up on it, but you're giving them horse tranquilizer, so it's not, you don't love it,
Gotcha.
but it's not. Don't give up on it. And if someone says that you want to give it a try, give it a try. It's not going to hurt you. I mean, they're not going to give it to you, so it's not like you can get addicted to it.
Gotcha. Dak asks, this is a little bit of a long one, but it's a really, really good one. Okay.
I'm ready. I'm going to focus. I'm so focused right now.
You're the most focused you've ever been. Dacre, 18
Dacre?
asks. It's Dacre, yeah.
Dacre, gotcha.
Yeah. I have an ADHD question. I have some sleep issues where I wake up and just want to stay in bed. Nothing bad, just comfortable and pleasant. I'm still trying to make an appointment with a psychiatrist to see if I possibly have ADHD. My question, could the symptom that causes procrastination until the last minute also cause the same feeling of getting out of bed? Referring to the point where the urgency to get out of bed reaches a point where I finally get out of bed.
Yeah, I can.
Beds are lovely, though. That's true, Bliffle. I agree with that.
The best way, this is counterintuitive. Well, it's not counterintuitive, but you don't hear this much. I say it. There's a number of other ADHD specialists who will also say the same thing. The best way to think of ADHD is a limitation in using anxiety effectively and understanding the impact of time. There are automatic processes that exist all the time in our brains, and we're not aware of them. If you enter VR, you start to duck under things that are virtual. You're not in an actual room with things that you have to duck under, but your brain is asking 2 questions at all times. Is this place real? And am I in it? And it's getting cues, and it says, hey, boss, don't worry about it. I'll figure this out. And then I'll give you my summation, which is why you look like an idiot ducking under virtual objects. I do it all the time.
I duck while I drive in a car. If I duck, am I over a bridge and the bridge has a train going over it, I'll duck. Before I even recognize. Yeah. What?
What I've been doing with my mask? I've been doing my mask lately. My brain interprets it as glasses because that's all I ever wear. So when I can't see something, I'll pull my mask down as if it'll help me. And worse, this is the worst. This is the worst. I'll be at Target or something, walking, assuming I have glasses on when it's a mask, and I'll totally do the weird side eye, like just watching people. Because I'm like, oh, they think I'm just looking forward. I'm like side-eyeing them. And then they're like, he's looking at me. I'm like, oh, I'm not wearing glasses. Oh, it's a mask. I'm like, oh no, I'm the weird guy. I just liked your Ninja Turtle shirt. That's all. I was just trying to read what Leonardo was saying, and I agree with him. Cowabunga. Okay. So the time thing, that's also an automatic process. If it's Monday and I have a test Friday, and I think I have that test, a neurotypical individual will think, I'll do it later. And then their brain is going to be like, I'm not going to let you feel comfortable yet, because I can understand that 100 hours from now is actually not a long time, and we got to study to do well. So you're going to say, I'm going to play video games and do it later, but I'm not going to let you feel comfortable. So eventually you're going to stop playing video games and do it. ADHD, it could be 48 hours tends to be the average. Could be 49 hours before the test. Oh, I have that test. I'll play some video games. I'll study later. And the brain is like, good idea. I'm going to provide you with some relief.
Time.
I'm going to provide you with some relief right now until you get within a 48-hour window.
I'm in this video and it hurts.
And then all of a sudden, within 48 hours, you say, I'll do it later. And all of a sudden, your brain says, that makes no sense. We call it future utility, how my current actions will affect future me. And the other part is the same part of our brain that we use to feel some compassion for somebody else, we use to feel compassion for our future selves. And ADHD people don't have that area lighting up. They're literally like, dude, F future me. That's for him to figure out. It's all about current me, baby girl. Oh, like that's basically what it is. So it's like, screw that guy. And then future you comes to present and it's like, curse you past me. You know, it's like, it's a terrible place to be stuck. You're like stuck in a moment of a 48-hour loop.
Is there an opposite side of that where
anxiety?
What?
Anxiety.
Oh.
Anxiety for people who just have anxiety.
I thought you said my name.
It'll be a month before a paper is due, and they can't go to bed until it's done because they don't understand time.
I was about to ask you that. So I don't understand because I always had that conflict, and I think it's the reason why I never went and got diagnosed with ADHD until I was 29, because I was always like, these are normal things, being this forgetful and this inattentive and everything. But and I functioned like I just had always 4 notebooks with me, and that's that's how I got by. And I always looked at other people like they're just not as organized as I am. And the fact was that I was making up for my disorganization by over compensating for it.
You were intervening on it.
Yeah. Right. So it wasn't like I didn't know, but I was already working on it because I had to get through freaking life somehow. So okay, so all that aside, I was the kid in college who everybody would be like, oh, I was up until 2 a.m. writing that paper. And I was like, I wrote it last week. I don't know what you're talking about, but it would be partly because I knew I feel like it would be because I couldn't comprehend how long the future is. So I don't know if that's an anxiety thing or if that's a whatever thing, but
anxiety. We have gosh, you know what we should do one time? We should talk about the psychology of time and the way it affects mental health conditions.
Let's do it.
That'd be a great one, because that is a whole big concept that would be whole conversation that's really interesting.
Awesome. Let's do it. I'm putting it on.
I was about to start, but then I remembered you had a bunch of questions. So I want to respect those from those people.
Oh, wait. Okay, so I know that that's a separate thing, but so that's more an anxiety thing. That's not necessarily an ADHD thing. I've had a hard time discerning which is which. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it is hard. And to be honest, people will get a diagnosis and then through their own experience will think that a lot of their experiences are because of that diagnosis. When in actuality, it's just not. I knew a guy, he was a clinician, mind you, who believed that Asperger's and ADHD were virtually the same thing. And as an ADHD Aspie specialist, I was like, ugh. I was like, no. But the idea is they probably have both. But they predominantly define themselves by one of them. And then they're just like, yeah, it's all the same. And it's like, no, that's your experience. But no.
Well, they overlap a lot. And I've heard this
Sometimes.
Before, that people with ADHD get misdiagnosed and
it can happen.
Yeah. And opposite.
A lot of comorbidity. But it's like an example would be, let's take Asperger's and ADHD. There's been this myth that's arisen that people with Asperger's have poor executive functioning. That's not necessarily true. It says no part of the criterion. And many Aspies, that's a strength of theirs because they have a ritualistic routine and everything has to be done just so, right? And it's, so the idea of no, they don't necessarily have that. But they do tend to have similar difficulties with socializing, but for different reasons. Johnny with ADHD struggles to socialize because he's unaware of his loudness He's impulsive. He doesn't think before he speaks. He just gets excited. He says something inappropriate, and we live in a cancel culture where if you have ADHD, good luck, because you're going to say things on accident, and then people will never ever forgive you, and they don't know it, but they're discriminating against someone with a disability, and it's awful. But if you were to give them a social story, Tommy and Billy come up, and Tommy's not looking Billy in the eye. What do you think Billy's thinking? Well, he probably doesn't think Tommy likes him or is interested. Good job, ADHD, kiddo. And then you ask the Aspie guy, and be like, I don't know. It's like, what's up? They both thinking about Pokemon. So close. So close. Very close.
No, that's true too. Bliffle's laughing because the whole description of the everything, the ADHD kid, my drag name is Justin. Justin Yu.
Justin. There you go. There you go. So it's hard, and it's really hard to, especially if you're a mental health advocate or someone, if you yourself have a mental health condition, it's hard to try to parse that out, because you've experienced it. Right?
Well, and I feel like there's a spotlight, probably for a good reason, because there's a spotlight on me I don't want somebody to be like, oh, that's a depression. I see it. It's because of her depression. I don't want somebody else to do, but I know people are doing that, or looking at my behavior and then being like, maybe I have that. Oh, I'm gonna go. If they go to a therapist after that, perfect, great, that's what I want. But if they just self-diagnose based on like, oh, anxiety is so quirky, I have quirkies too, so probably ADHD. Yeah,
that's what happens.
Yeah, but I worry about, I worry about that. That's something that's on the top of, more and more increasingly, social responsibility has been on my neck hurts. There's a strain in my neck. As soon as I said social responsibility, my neck went, it's just my whole body tenses up. It's a thing. Yeah. Yeah. Talk about somatic response. Okay. All right. Okay, so why is it so hard? Gearwolf asked, next question. Gearwolf asked, why is it so hard sometimes to get others to see ADHD as a true diagnosis? All right, we want to talk about this. I mean, going back with what we said earlier, trying to brush it off as, oh, you have that. It's not like a real diagnosis. Somebody asked this on Twitter the other day, and I almost screamed, and I wrote 4 draft tweets that I ended up deleting, thankfully, because all of them were just like, how could you say that? How could you think that? How could you put it out there? The tweet was, ADHD, is it real? Thoughts?
So let's just be clear. And I know you know this. It's not debatable.
It's not. That's the problem. That was the bottom line of the problem. That it's not supposed to be debatable. It's eyes. Are they real? I don't know.
Let's chat. These things where color and contrast allegedly enters and we interpret it.
Right.
Eyes?
Right.
I consider them face holes. What do your face holes do? Oh God. But let's do the opposite side. Let's do the opposite. People on Twitter, are they real? Tonight at 9.
Oh God. No, so Jaden Smith asked very famously, right? If our eyes are real, how are mirrors real? I think that was the question.
Oh, honey.
Yeah,
God bless you, Jaden.
Yeah, poor. This is what happens when you grow up on the internet. Poor thing.
Oh no.
Okay, all right.
Jaden, sweet, poor Jaden.
People on Twitter, are they real? Yes.
So let's do the opposite. Let's look at evidence of why they doubt it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In the 90s, in early 2000s, ADHD was the hot topic, like Asperger's, and then after that was bipolar. That was the hot diagnosis. There's always a hot diagnosis. We call them trash bin diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
They're just given out everywhere. All right. So everyone was being diagnosed with ADHD, ADD or ADHD. So many people were being diagnosed. Overdiagnosis was not debatable.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of people walking around saying they had ADHD and they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To this day, I will get people. I had someone the other day in a PhD program, 4th year of a PhD program, terrible sleeping habits and things like that, getting a B, and they were struggling with the B, coming in saying, I'm really struggling to focus. I think I have ADHD. I said, you are in a an Ivy League grad school program, and he's wanting medicine. He's wanting stimulants, which are also a cognitive enhancer. Even if you don't have ADHD, if you take it, you're gonna think.
Well,
better.
that was what they did in the 90s. They'd be like, I'm going to give you this medication, and if you and if it works for you, then you have ADHD, which is now not okay, but that was how they would determine the illness at the time.
Well, to some extent. Now, here's the way to think of it, right? When we look at ADHD, they have a cognitive profile, meaning typically their verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning is fine. It's actually high, but their working memory and processing speed are low. Not because they're, that they actually don't have the areas of the brain that do that. It's because those are so heavily dependent on being able to pay attention. If I give that kid a stimulant, if someone gives that kid a stimulant, guess what? That 80 score is going to fly up to a 110 if they have ADHD. If they don't have ADHD, it's not going to budge much. It'll go up maybe 5 or 7 points.
Really?
It'll improve, but it's not going to skyrocket because you have not, the reason for it was a cognitive deficit, not inattention, right? So there are some aspects that you can sort of pre and post assess on a stimulant.
Okay.
And out of any psychopharmaceutical, for any mental health condition among children and adolescents, stimulants for ADHDs are the most effective. But they're also very intrusive. They're likely to have side effects, low appetite, agitation in the evening, sleep problems, whatever, right? Anxiety, depression, like heart problems. It's a lot that it can cause. So you don't want to rush to it. But anyway, the point being is this guy couldn't focus because he's like running his car at 200 miles per hour, right? You don't say, I think there's a hole in my radiator. What's going on? I'm driving my car 300 miles per hour and it's overheating. You don't have a hole in your radiator, bro. You're driving 300 miles per hour, right? So we have, good night, guys. They have some evidence that makes them doubt it. Our job, ideally, is to point them, and then they even have psychologists who still say it's not real, and they're ridiculous. I don't know how they got their degrees. But no, there is no one in the scientific community who doubts ADHD. It's not a thing. It's real, of course. The debate is, are people overdiagnosed? Yes. Are some things that are not ADHD called ADHD? Yes. Right? But of course, ADHD is real.
Okay. Yeah. The whole overdiagnosis thing reminds me of the whole overprescribed thing, which it's not that's not real. It's just bringing it in. When people bring that into a debate, it diminishes the value of what they're saying to me. When they're like, well, more people are overdiagnosed, and so that must mean that this person that I'm talking about is overdiagnosed. And I'm like, no.
To be clear, none of the devil advocate points I proposed are to claim that it's not real. No.
Right. No.
But on their side, if they're like, well, I know this guy and whatever, again, people will invest way too much in their personal experience. Like, well, my experience was a guy who, would just said it to get medicine, right? And then you're like, did you educate yourself further? No, I just believe that, and then anything that confirmed it, I learned that, and anything that didn't confirm it, I didn't listen. I didn't pay attention. Right. But I just like the brain imaging and just like, Lord, even with ADHD, if you get them to do a working memory task with their eyes shut versus eyes closed, the brain waves change. Compared to people who don't have ADHD. There's a lot of hard ways to show an ADHD brain. We've even identified allele sets. The DRD4 allele set, which has to do with dopamine release, is elongated in people with ADHD. We've identified combinations of GTAC. Yeah. It's not subtle, right?
Right. This is a lot. My brain is so full.
I'm sorry.
No. A lot. Good, a lot. I say a lot like a good thing. My brain is so full of all kinds of knowledge now and all kinds of retorts to sassy people. I love it. I love it so much. Begs for all the info dumps. This is why you're here. All right. So, but we do have to wrap up because people have been listening to us talk for 2 hours. And that's
thank you, everyone
who's been listening, right?
Great.
Pretty heckin' impressive. So thank you so much for that. So on that note, Do you have anything else that you want to make sure we say? So I'm posting links to the Discord, to your Twitter, to Geeks Like Us. I'm posting all those links around. So please be sure to follow him on all the platforms. Geeks Like Us actually combines a bunch of really, really, really cool therapists and just professionals in doctors. Just doctors?
Oh, and I will be, because I see some people really liking the neuro, which really it means a lot to me because I get very geeked out about it and I watch the lights leave people's eyes typically when I talk about it. So I love that you're able to appreciate it. But I'll be doing something, if you're interested in that, a show where I go into my big 20 by 16 foot room. I draw these massive brains with these profiles so I can show you the structures and how they work. And I go in there and you can sort of see me messing around with it and what therapy does, how it alleviates it. So you might be interested in that. But yeah, I mean, please join us at GLU, and she provided the things. And again, I'm very responsive. So if you have questions, Twitter is a good way to do it.
Yes.
Aside from that, oh gosh, I mean, we hit so much. I think in the future doing a psychology of time would be fascinating. And yeah, I just thank you so much for all the involvement. You guys asked amazing questions. I get very long-winded, so thanks for bearing with me.
Oh,
it's excitement.
It's
Excitement is what it is.
It is excitement. It is excitement. It was wonderful. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Me.
Everybody, I'm going to send you off on a raid. If you feel like the world is dark and nobody can give you the love and the care that you need, go out there and be the light to others. Have a wonderful night. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.